What is going on in Kashmir, which was called the heaven on earth by Alexander? Every day comes with the dawn of new funerals of Kashmiris in this paradise.
Kashmir has been the flashpoint for 2 of the 3 wars between India and Pakistan. Recent decades have been marked by violence and instability, which have left tens of thousands of people dead and thousands more disappeared. MSF began mental health activities in Jammu and Kashmir nearly a decade ago in an attempt to address some of the trauma that the population has endured.
Our pledge to the people of Kashmir, if you like, the people of this world, that this matter could be affirmed or cancelled by the people of Kashmir according to their wishes. We do not wish to win people against their will with the help of armed force, and if the people want to part company with us, they may go their own way and we shall go ours.
कि जहाँ तक कश्मीर है उसका 1 इंच भी हम समझौता करने के लिए तैयार नहीं। पूरा कश्मीर जो हिस्सा जिसको पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर कहते हैं वो भी हिंदुस्तान का हिस्सा है। इसको हम किसी तरीके से अलग नहीं कर सकते। ये झूठी बात है कि हमारी सरकार ने प्लेबिसाइट प्रॉमिस की थी, वो तो जवाहरलाल नेहरू ने प्रॉमिस की थी। जिनको प्लेबिसाइट चाहिए वो जवाहरलाल नेहरू से जाकर बात करें। परंतु जहाँ तक हिंदुस्तान की कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है उसके अनुसार ऐसा कोई कंडीशन नहीं है और इसीलिए कश्मीर पूरा हमारा है, उसके लिए हम इतना भी लड़ने के लिए तैयार हैं।
Such radicalized approach of Indian politicians has led to more than 500 civilians killed by Indian Army in Kashmir in 2018. Imagine if we were killed for just pelting a stone against a brutal soldier and then called by that soldier to be a militant.
Urging both the state government and the central government first to immediately stop the use of pellet firing shotguns to police demonstrations and ensure that the use of any other weapons like Pava shells is in line with international human rights standards on the use of force. We're also urging them to provide full reparation, including compensation and rehabilitation, to those who have been injured by pellet firing shotguns and to the families of those who have been killed. The reparation that is provided should cover any medical or psychological care that may be needed. We're also urging authorities to initiate prompt, independent and impartial civilian investigations into all incidents where the use of these shotguns led to deaths or serious injuries, to establish whether arbitrary or excessive force was used, and where there is sufficient evidence, those suspected of responsibility should be prosecuted.
Kashmiris still wait for justice and freedom from oppressive regime of India.
Roy, about Kashmir. We spoke in London. She began by describing how Kashmir is the unfinished business of the partition of India in 1947.
Since the 1990s, which is when, at the same time that the war in Afghanistan, the American one is jihad in Afghanistan, and India realigned itself and became, what it is now, sort of completely aligned with the U.S. and the whole problem in Kashmir, the militant armed struggle for independence. I mean, there was always a struggle for independence. It's not independence. It's not ever been really a part of India, which is why it's ridiculous for the Indian government to keep saying it's an integral part of India. But that armed struggle claimed the lives of 68,000 people, because India today has 500,000 troops manning that little valley. It's the highest, most militarized zone in the world. India has done everything wrong there. Apart from a military occupation, it has completely rigged elections. It has changed that valley into a little sort of puddle, a little pool of spies and informers and intelligence networks and torture chambers. And today, it's come to a stage where people have just had enough. Now you don't even know who the rulers are, or who the leaders of the uprising are, because it's just people who cannot take it anymore. But the government still is quite busy trying to manage the crisis. there's all sorts of shady things going on, claiming mobs are setting business buildings on fire, when it does look very much as though the intelligence agencies are doing that themselves in order to, paint this uprising in a different light. But the fact is that it's a bit like feeding a population heavy metal in its diet all the time, and that metal, that toxicity, it just lives in the body, and it goes into different places at different times, but the body never gets rid of it. And now that toxicity has reached a stage where I really think that until the international community somehow pays attention, this small valley is going to be just squashed by this completely, intransigent juggernaut that is the Indian state, that will not back off, doing something absolutely immoral, absolutely as bad as it is in any.
Both Amnesty International and Arundhati Roy were booked by the radicalized Indian government under sedition.
Sasha Matthews spoke to me from Delhi on Tuesday, the day that he left Kashmir after his 18-month assignment as project coordinator ended. He had been based in Srinagar, the state capital, where he ran MSF's medical activities. MSF also supports basic health care clinics, in addition to the mental health care programs in Srinagar and Kupwara. Sasha said that when he left Kashmir, a curfew was in place again, due to yet another violent incident. He described the area as, in a word, militarized.
Everything is occupied by the security forces. Every single public space is taken over, like cinemas, schools, public buildings, stadiums, and so on. There's huge amount of barbed wire. If you pull out all the barbed wire, Kashmir probably can go, I don't know how many times back and forth from the earth to the moon. It's just amazing. There is a huge number of convoys that continue to go up and down across the valley, and there are bunkers everywhere.
Every Friday after prayers, he said, the protests would begin.
They would sort of claim to protest peacefully, but then as soon as the security forces would come out, then stone pelting would start. Because it's basically the youth throwing stones at the security forces striking back, usually sort of in the early parts of 2009. It was more with tear gas shelling, with baton, but what happened in the summer, they were actually started responding more and more with live bullets, with guns.
People started getting killed, and a killing would spark another protest and more stone throwing, which would result in more death.
Recent escalation of violence by the state, the witnesses claim that the soldiers fired indiscriminately. WikiLeaks exposed US diplomats' cables quoting Red Cross. The ICRC concluded that India condones torture and that the torture victims were civilians. Carnage of Indian atrocities is piling up, but no one speaks up for Kashmiris except Pakistan.
The rights activists accuse the Indian government of playing politics ahead of state assembly elections in November and December.
The government wants to escalate tensions here so that it gives them a benefit in the mindset of the people, so that they can create an image that they have beaten up Kashmiris badly and they're treating Kashmiris in a very bloody manner, because that's what unfortunately sells. The body bags of Kashmiris sell in Indian elections, unfortunately.
Separatist groups in Kashmir have been fighting against the Indian government since the end of British rule and the partition of India in 1947. This is the latest family to be affected by the violence. Their 15-year-old son was killed on Sunday during a separatist protest. They accuse Indian security forces of using excessive force.
Almost every day a funeral takes place here. It's so sad when a father has to shoulder the coffin of his son. India's oppression is increasing every day. I think the Indian government should come to an agreement on Kashmir so that this bloodshed stops.
first ever United Nations Human Rights Report for Kashmir has been released, which asks for an independent inquiry into multiple violations by India. Unfortunately, India is being run by an extremist leadership who have no regard for the recently published Human Rights Report of the United Nations. There are only two ways to liberate Kashmiris. Number one, a nuclear World War III between India and Pakistan. Number two, boycott and sanction India for oppressing the Kashmiris. Which way out of the two would you choose? A nuclear apocalypse or to boycott India? Your delay in decision making is inching the world closer to a World War III. As the fascist regime of India refuses to respect international codes of justice, continuously producing more body bags of Kashmiris every day. If India is boycotted and sanctioned today by you, the persecution of Kashmiris could end and a World War III could be prevented by you. Because your pressure will force India to agree with conducting the UN-mediated plebiscite. So what are you waiting for? Every second of your inaction is killing more innocent Kashmiris and bringing you closer to an